Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. My information here is on the screen. I posted it in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. And today we're going to take a peek at building some swim goggles or a diving face mask. And this is actually kind of like if you look at a swim mask, there's a lot of really complicated forms going on there. And if you were trying to implicitly model that stuff in Nurbs, I think it would probably make you insane. Um, the the thing about Rhino 7, anybody who's not using Rhino 7, get Rhino 7. It's got SubDs in it, and that is what we're going to use to pull this magic trick off as far as making this really, really complex item actually fairly simple. And we're going to try and break it down a little bit and talk about strategy and when to use SubD and when not to use SubD and when to use Nurbs and how they fit together and all that kind of stuff. So to start this model off, I've got this buck, this head that I've had forever. I don't even know where I got it, but it's something that I just have stashed in my clip art file. And we're going to use that as a fit model. And then I've done this rather scruffy sketch and brought it in using the picture command. And I've placed it in front of the model, which if you've seen any of my other webinars, you know that I typically stick the images back in space. But in this case, I'm gonna leave the picture actually in front of the scene. And I've got it organized by layers here. I've just got this locked so I can take this and move it around and then lock it and not be able to affect it or the head. And so what we're going to do is go to front view. And I think what we're going to start with is the lens here. And I think the lens, because it's fairly planar, in fact, it's actually super planar, we're going to start with the frame, and then we're going to project a curve onto the face. So we're going to have the front of the model, and we're going to have the back of the model, and then we're going to figure out how to connect the two using SubD and blend and a couple other things like that. So if this is your first getting started video or webinar, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The thing that I want to emphasize is that these are intended to be interactive, so please find the chat. If you see something that I do that you're like, what in the world was that? Hit the chat, let me know. I'll break out for a second and we'll talk about what happened and how to do it. These are also unrehearsed. I did this sketch about a half hour ago when I was thinking about what I wanted to make, and I have never built a scuba mask or a swim mask before. So we did goggles in the last webinar, but this is a little different modeling problem. And we did swim fins before, so I'm kind of on a swim fin kick. It's open water swimming season here in Seattle, and my wife and I do some ocean swimming, and so I've been playing with a lot of my swimming gear lately. So it's so I'm on a bit of a swim gear kick right now, but this is actually a really interesting modeling problem because it brings up Nurbs, it brings up SubDs, it brings up how to fit something to a to a buck. We'll talk about SubD friendly curves and all sorts of stuff like that. So fill your coffee, buckle up. We're going to probably move pretty fast, so don't try and model with me. These are all posted on our YouTube page, and I will give you that link at the end. It's just Rhinoceros 3D on YouTube if you want to look it up. That's where all of this stuff gets posted, so you can go back and look at it at your own speed. But if you want to just take notes now, that would be great. And then when the video gets posted later, we'll jump into it. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm actually going to make a custom seaplane. And what I'm going to do is actually snap the seaplane to this model here, or to the image, and then I'm actually going to pull it forward just a little bit because I want the sketch to be in front of the drawing that I'm going to do, the curves that I'm going to draw to be in front of the sketch. And typically what I would do is I would push the sketch back in space, but because we're going to be working off of the head, and I want the sketch in front of the head, and then I want the the NURBS curves in front of the sketch, we're gonna do that by just going in here, and we're going to make a custom C-plane. We're gonna snap it to, I gotta unlock this, to this object. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna drop our curves right onto this object. And the only problem with that, and I'm just recognizing this, is that it looks like it moved the center of it because my sketch is not dead centered. So let's do this. Let's just place, let's do, let's snap it to this, and you can see that it actually comes off of center just a little bit. And then I'm actually going to just move the origin of this back to kind of where it should be, which is kind of right down the center of this thing. And what that should do is that should give us, if I come over here and go to the perspective view, and I can't use my perspective hotkey because that has a setting on it to move my construction plane back to world top. So let's set this. Let's rotate the C-plane, and we're gonna just start at 0, and we're just gonna rotate it in the top view like that. And then let's go back to the front perspective view, and that's not doing what I wanted it to do. So let's just snap it. Let's snap it there. And then I'm going to just move the C-plane over just a little bit. And I'm just going to set that right in the center. All right, so that gives us our C-plane. And now when we draw on this, and if I go to perspective view, and again, I have a hotkey. The reason I can't use my hotkey for the perspective view, and I have to go over here and pick it, is I have a hotkey set up on my perspective to actually reset the C-plane back to world space. So we are going to just run with that. So if I go back to my front view, now what we can start doing is I can start drawing, and I know that my curves are going to be located on that C-plane. And so I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm just going to pull out, and I'm going to start drawing curves. And we're going to just keep these nice and simple. And this is going to be a NURBS curve for now. So I'm just going to follow NURBS rules of 3. I'm going to line this up as well. Something like that. And then we're going to mirror this curve. Oh, let me adjust it first. And this is going to be kind of the foundation and the building block for the entire model. So we're going to fuss this just a little bit, which I typically don't get too crazy about it, but this is going to be what we're going to use to build. Essentially, the whole rest of the model is going to be based off of this curve. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time pushing this around to get it pretty close to what we want. And there's always this judgment, right? There's always this back and forth between using the curve and using the sketch, because most of the time the sketch is lying, cheating, and stealing. And so I tend to bias my design decisions based on the model as opposed to the sketch. And look like this point got a little out of joint, so I'm going to snap it back to there. There is a setting in Gumball, by the way, called snappy dragging, and it lives in this bunny tail. And snappy dragging makes it respect the O snaps, which are down here. And so this is super useful because in this case, if I back up one, this point got back in space here where I didn't really want it to be. And so what I did is I just grabbed this point, dragged it up here, and then held down my O snap, and it's going to snap to the end of that. You can see that that puts it right back where I kind of wanted it to be in the first place. So now I'm going to mirror this. I'm going to lock this image so it doesn't select. And we're going to just go to the front view and we're going to mirror this. And then we're going to make sure that these points all line up. And we're going to do that by selecting these. And it looks like those are good, but it looks like these two aren't. So I'm going to grab those two. And I'm just going to scale those to 0. And then I'm going to use my gumball, and it looks like those are lined up, so I'm going to let it go. Now, I don't have a tangent match here, and the reason I know that is because these three curves, or these 3 points, are not in line, and the reason that I can tell that is because when I select them, I have a scale handle here. So I'm going to just fix that. I'm going to scale that to 0. And now these are tangents, so I know there's not going to be any issues going across the center line, but it changed my shape a little bit, so I'm going to just use the scale handle and pull those in. And you can see that I get the shape back that I wanted, and I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. And then I'm going to pull these in, and then I'm going to pull these guys up just a tiny bit. And then we've got a nice tangent match along there. And we know that because if we select these 3 points, we don't have a scale handle. So that means that these are tangent, these are lined up, and tangency is this point and this point and this point and this point all in a straight line. And we can verify that if I turn this on and we go with a center snap, you can see that those are all in a straight line. So that's a tangent match across the center lines. And that's the really quick visual way of being able to see that. We're going to check the same thing down here and see that we have a teeny tiny scale handle. So I'm going to just scale that to 0. And we know that those are now lined up. So those are tangent across the center line. So that's the main crux that we have to pull off here. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to join this up. And this is going to be our base curve here. And if I turn the points on for this curve, you can see that we have, a fairly well-structured curve. We've only got 3 points in the corners. We don't have anything crazy going on here. We don't have a million points that we don't need. And that's kind of the basis of what we want to do here. Now, I do need to make some offsets here. And the problem with offsets, and this has been a change from earlier versions of Rhino on, is if I do an offset, I just, let's say I do 0.5 offset. And let's go bigger than that. Let's go, I think I might be in millimeters here. Must be. That's too much. If I go here and I have this set to loose no, when I turn the points on, look at how many points I have. This is actually a really bad scenario, which we don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do that same thing. I'm going to offset, but I'm going to change this to loose yes, and I'm going to let it offset. And when we do that, you can see that it preserves the point structure that we had before. So this is all nice and neat. Now, the way that this used to happen, and I'm going to delete this for the time being, is what I used to refer to as the Dave Schultz offset trick. And if you don't know Dave Schultz, he's a teacher at Otis College of Art and Design, a good friend of mine for years, and he came up with this offset hack that I thought was really cool. And we actually kind of incorporated that concept into the idea of offset loose so that it preserves the point structure. But I want to show you Dave's trick because it's neat and it works really well. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this curve. And then we're going to turn the points on for that curve. And then we're going to cell points using the cellpt command. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to use move UVN, which is this one. And if you haven't seen this tool before, it's a really neat little procedural modeling tool that allows you to be able to move stuff by sliders. And if I grab this and just offset normal, look what happens. It just moves those points in or out. And the cool thing about this is it's a direct offset, right? So you can see what's happening. The points come here and they just travel in the direction of the normal off of the curve. And it allows you to kind of very precisely dial in where you want this stuff to be. And I actually prefer this tool over offset loose because I can just visually go, well, that's about what I want right there. And the cool thing about this is, and it looks like I have to, looks like I didn't copy and paste my curve for some reason. Oh, there it is. Let me kill my history. And let's move that again. There we go. And so what it does is it allows you to be able to kind of dial in on it. And it has this scale feature in here as well. So the scale set to 10 right now. If I change the scale to 1, all of that slider action happens slower. So I can get really, really precise with it and put it where I want it, which I think is really cool. Now, the thing about this is it also works if I wanted to just do a portion of the files or a portion of the curve. So, you know, we look good here. This is kind of a parallel offset. But if I take this and I drag this in a little bit more, I can do a variable offset because I just offset the normal up here. Now, the cool thing about this is if I turn this on and I turn the points on for both of these, the points line up perfectly, which is super useful if you want to do something like a loft, because the loft then comes out really, really nice. See that? So that's really cool because look at how nice and organized the isoparams are. And I'm sure you've seen stuff in the past where you've done a loft and your isoparams have gone all crazy. So let's hide this for a second and I'll show you an example of that. If we just do a standard loft, right? And let's do this not loose. Let's do it strict. And this is a perfect numeric offset. So if you measured this all the way around, it would be perfect. The loose is not perfect. It will vary a little bit, but in my experience, the loose is actually more often what you want. So if I loft this now and I run it, and it actually did a pretty good job. Let's see. Oh, it's because I did it loose. Duh. Let's try this again. Let's do it right. And we are gonna have it loose no. So now this is a complicated curve, right? So this is the bad example, which I was trying to show before. And we run this, you get isoparams that look like that. And so you think, why in the world would I ever want that? Well, there's options within the loft dialog that you can refit and change and do all this kind of stuff. But there's an obvious disadvantage to trying to loft between two dissimilar point count curves in the fact that you have to deal with this. And in this case, actually, loft probably would not be the right tool. You'd probably use something like 2-rail sweep and then have to do some rebuilds and all that kind of stuff. Much cleaner version is just to simply use this offset with the loose setting, or use Dave's trick, which I like because it gives you the ability to be able to do this kind of stuff. So let's do that again. Let's copy and paste this. And then we're going to grab the pasted curve. I'm going to kill my history. And then let's cell points. And then let's move UVN. And let's drag this in by the normal a little bit. We're going to get our second curve here. And I'm going to bump up the scale a little bit. And we're going to bring it in like this. Now, there are some limitations. If I really crank this, and I need to go pretty far in order to get this where I want it, you'll see that, especially down here in the corner, see what happens down here? This starts to self-intersect. And so you do have to kind of, you know, use a little bit of common sense when you're doing this. But let's get it close everywhere. And it looks like we're kind of good up here. We're good down here. We're good-ish around there. Let's take these and we're going to move those up just a little bit like that. And then we're going to do a little bit of manual modeling here. And we're going to just pull these around how we want them to be. Now, the cool thing about this is it still maintains the same point count. If I turn on my points by hitting the F10 key, you can see that I still have very consistent point locations. And I didn't do this symmetrically. Don't tell. Don't tell people watching this video that I didn't do this symmetrically. What we'll do at the end of this is we'll just delete one half of it and mirror it so that it is actually symmetrical. But you can see that we get really beautifully laid out curves here, right? We didn't have to do a whole lot of work. And there is a tangency break here, and we know that because if we drag this, what do we have? A handle, right? So we're just going to scale this to 0, and we're going to fix that. So now that discontinuity is gone, that little peak, if I undo that, you can see it, right? See this little peak right there? We don't want that. So I'm going to just flatten that out by scaling to 0. So that way we don't have any centerline issues. And if I grab this side and just delete it, and then I'm going to grab this side again and mirror it, now we have a symmetrical copy and we know everything's cool, right? So that's the basis of our mask so far. Now, so what we've got is a sloping surface that comes up here. It breaks to a flat, and then this actually drops off a little bit. So we actually need a third curve here. So I'm going to copy paste, or fourth curve actually. And I'm going to scale this. I've got to sell the points. Select points. Grab this guy. And we're going to scale this out just a hair, right? Just a hair, because it's not, we don't want a sharp fall off, and my sketch isn't showing this. So we've got everything we need to do in order to build the face mask, the plate section now. So I can get rid of this and go to perspective view, and I don't care whether I lose my C-plane at this point. I'm going to hide this for now. And I'm actually going to even hide the image, because now what we need to do is we need to start placing this stuff in space. So I'm actually going to pull this curve just back a little bit, right? Like that. And then so it's going to slope to here. There's going to be a flat, and then this one is actually going to go back a little bit. And this puts us in a position where we can now do a couple of things. I can just simply loft all these guys, right? I can go like that. Looks like we've got an open curve somewhere. Looks like my ends are not joined here. That's the problem right there. So let's grab these guys and grab this end and this end, and we're going to just scale those to 0. So that should be cell open curve, shows no open curve, so now we can loft this. See, I do the dumb thing so you don't have to. And that gives us a surface, right? If we go to shaded view, we can see what's going on here. And it gives us kind of what we wanted, but not really. So I think what we might want to do is do this in a couple of pieces and then manage the transitions ourselves. Now we could do this with straight sections, which gives us a little bit closer to what we wanted. I probably wouldn't mind a little bit of crown here, but actually let's work with that. That's fine. Let's just use that. And so now what this does is this gives us a poly surface that's pretty well developed already, right? But we want to massage this a little bit. So I'm actually going to extract these two surfaces and turn their points on. And you can see that this is a degree 1 surface because it's only got 2 points. So there's nothing in the middle, which means I can't add any crown to it, because you need, how many points to make crown? You need 3, right? There's a video I did called Rule of 3 on YouTube that you might want to take a peek at. I talk in exhaustive detail about Rule of 3 and bending corners and stuff like that. But this violates Rule of 3, so that we can't actually have any crown in this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these, and I'm just going to run, I have a hotkey for change degree. The command is change degree. And what I'm going to do is change that from degree 1, which is the highlighted degree up here in the command line, and I'm going to change that to 3. And I'm going to do it in both directions. And the thing about change degree is if you're going up in degree, actually I'm going to change that to 2 because I only need 3 points. So now I've got 3 points, and it's not deformable. So let's go change 3. Let's go to 3. All right. So now I've got enough points where I can actually grab these 2 center rows, and I've actually got 1 more than I need, which is, that's all right. So let's grab this and run cell U. Nope, I always do that backwards. Cell V. And that's going to select all the points in that direction. And I'm going to just duplicate that around on both sides so that we've got just that center row. All right, now I'm going to bring up move UVN again. And I'm going to move it using that same normal, but I'm going to use this a smaller scale. And I'm just going to puff that just a little bit. And let's zoom in on it so you can see what's happening. All right, if I undo that, if we just drag it a little bit, see how that just puffs it up a little bit? And so we've got a really clean model that's really easy to manage, and we can make the modifications to it the way we want. Now, I want a little bit of crown on the inside of this too, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to extract it. I'm going to change degree. I'm going to change it to 3 and 3. And we're going to turn on the points. F10 key turns on points. And I'm going to pick these. And I'm going to cell V. Hopefully it's the same direction, and it is. And then we're just going to use this, and we're going to puff it up just a little bit. See that? So we added just a tiny bit of crown to that. And it's super, super clean. That's kind of the goal here. So now I grab everything and I join it back up. We should have a really nice joined up model, and we do. And now I can just grab this curve and we can just make the lens. And that's just going to be a planar surface. Okay. Now, what I'm not going to do is get into the internals of how this is all made and put together and snapped and all that kind of stuff. I just want to talk about like how to make the forms. The way that these are made is this section on the inside of this is a separate piece, and it pulls this way out of the model. And then the back of this actually has a lip on it. So this thing actually comes in on itself. And then the silicone part that clips to your face tucks in here and then has a channel that the glass actually sits in. So the glass is actually, in reality, is oversized. The silicone gaskets around that. It's trapped in from behind. You know, you stuff the silicone through and kind of pull it back so that the gasket rests on a surface that's back here. There's like a fin surface that sticks up. And then this piece in the front snaps in from the front and seals the whole thing up. I'm not going to get into that much detail on this. What I really want to focus on is the forms and how we do that. And so for this demonstration, which is not going to be accurate, I can hear all the scuba people out there going, "That's not how masks are made." I get it. Settle down, Jacques Cousteau. The idea with this is I want to talk about how we're going to go from this Nurbs object to then the silicone that's going to go on the model. So for lack of technical accuracy, I'm going to just take this, I'm going to stick it here, change object layer, and we're going to call this the faceplate. And we're going to call that kind of done now. We're going to just lock it so that it's settled down. And actually, I'm going to join it so it's all one piece. This show edges, by the way, excuse me, this show edges, by the way, actually has shown that there's a problem here. So let's fix it. This pink edge shows me that these two surfaces are not joined. So I'm gonna match surf, and I'm gonna pick this edge, and this edge, and I'm just going to put them together with tangency using average surface. I'm going to stick that together, join it back up. Now that pink line is gone, which means there's no naked edge there. So which is really important to keep track of if you're going to rapid prototype something. It's got to be watertight. Anytime you see a pink edge, that's an open edge that's not watertight. So this back of this thing is not watertight yet. and so now we need to start talking about the silicone. Got something in my throat. Hang on, I'm going to mute for a second. The pine trees are pollinating here in Seattle, so there's a jillion pounds of pollen in the air. It's getting me a little bit today. So we've got our faceplate. So let's position it in space, and I'm going to grab all this, and let's just kind of determine where about we want that, and let's just call that about where we want to be. And so now we have to bring up our image again, go to the front view and say, okay, well, how does the gasket lay out on the face? And it looks like up here, we're going to kind of start in the middle. I'm just going to wrap around and I'm going to project a curve onto the face. And that curve is going to be way more complex than we need. So we're going to work with that curve a little bit. But this is the main thing that we're going to key off of, is this contact point between the gasket and the face. So let's start up here, and I'm not even gonna worry about making this SubD friendly right now. So, and the difference between SubD friendly and not SubD friendly is if I draw a curve that is not SubD friendly and I extrude it, I get a surface, okay? If I take a curve and I make it SubD friendly and I extrude it, I get a SubD. Okay, so you're telling Rhino, do you want a surface or do you want a SubD? It's either SubD friendly yes and you get a SubD, or it's SubD friendly no and you get a Nurbs object. Okay, I think the nomenclature in that command probably could make more sense if it just said, do you want a Nurbs curve or a SubD curve? But I lost that fight. so let's go and just make a normal Nurbs curve, and I'm going to start based on the center line of this thing. I'm going to drag out holding shift so that I've got a tangent center line, and then we're just going to draw this curve vaguely about how we have it shown. And I'm going to use my O snaps. I'm going to hide the face for the time being because I don't want it to snap to that. I do want it to snap to the center line of the piece. So let's go here. And then I'm going to hide the faceplate. Actually, I'm not going to hide it just yet. Let's do a little bit of point fiddling. I'm going to drag this up, and then I run with my O snaps disabled. You may notice that down here. The Alt key is the temporary enabler. And so I'm going to drag up and down using the green arrow, but then I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to snap to the center because I'm using snappy dragging. And that way, if I do this, right, I've got no scale handle. That means I'm tangent. And that means that anything I do with this, as long as it goes just in or out in this direction, then my center line is going to be tangent. So I'm going to place that point there, and then I'm going to come down and use this point to get my shape back, which is kind of like that. And this needs to come out a little bit. And again, as long as I'm only going left, right, it's no big deal. It's gonna line up fine. All right, so that's kind of what I'm looking for. Maybe I'll pull this one out a little bit. All right, so that's going to give me kind of the basic shape, and this should mirror okay. Let's just double check and make sure that it all lines up. One close curve, so that means the ends line up, so I'm just going to undo it. No, I'll redo it. That's fine. You guys are like, wow, you really don't rehearse these. Nope. Making it up as I go along. All right, so let's bring the face back, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and let's hide everything except that. I'm going to hide the image as well. And oops, I need this curve and this, and I'm going to isolate just those two objects, and I can double check my fits, right, and say this is exact, this is pretty much what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to project this onto the SubD, and you can see how far back this goes in space. And because I did this with history, I can actually take this gasket now and this contact area, and I can scale it a little bit, and I can say, okay, that actually is closer to what I really wanted, and maybe even just a little bit more. And so I can actually dial the fits on this thing. Maybe this is too tight to the nose. So let's grab these points. And this is an incredibly useful thing to be able to do to see exactly where your curves are going to land in space, and maybe even just a little bit more like that. I've got my mask in front of me, and actually that distance right there is actually pretty short on my mask, so I'm going to let that roll. And then what we can do is say that, okay, this is peeling too far back onto the temple, which means this point and this point have to come in a little bit. And so we can actually use this curve and this flat curve to then adjust and paint on the model, the face model, what the actual contact shape of this thing needs to be. And as we pull this in, you can see that this is now creeping back up the temple. Maybe we want to expand these a little bit in order to get a little bit more even shape. And you say, well, the flat curve now doesn't match the shape that we want. Who cares? We don't care about that. This is the curve that we care about. So it doesn't matter if this curve is really tortured, the one in the front, as long as the one that's projected onto the face is doing what we want. And in this case, I think I'm going to roll with that. I think that's a fairly reasonable contact patch. And so in this case, I can actually even delete this because I don't care about that anymore. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this curve, and you can see how awful this curve is. It's got a bajillion points on it, and which we don't want. And so I'm going to stick this on its own layer. And let's hide everything except that curve. Don't need that one. I'm going to get rid of it. And so now we can look at this and say, okay, now that is, a very, very accurate representation of the contact patch on this. But if you look at any type of scuba mask, dive mask, or anything, it doesn't have this granular level of detail in here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to rebuild this curve, and what I'm going to get rid of half of it actually, because we don't need this other half. We're going to assume that the thing is symmetrical. And so I'm going to come up here and grab a center curve. I'm going to draw a curve from the center. I'm going to take this and just trim it. And we're only going to work on half this curve. And I can try to rebuild it, and I can drop this down from 331 points to 10, right? And I'm not going to make it SubD friendly at this point. And we can say that looks like a much more reasonable curve. Now I can also highlight in here, and if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel on it, you can actually just use the scroll wheel to dial up and down. And as you dial up and down, you can see where the curve, I've bored my dog to sleep. You can see where the curve is starting to peel way away from the model. And as I go down, I get better results, and worse results. And so in this case, I think 8 actually looks like a pretty good number here. And so I think I'm going to roll with that. And then I am going to make this SubD friendly. And you can see that the shape changes quite a bit. And so now I need to go back here and say, okay, is it 9? Is it 10? Is it, does 5 get me anywhere? Sometimes if you go lower numbers, you can get good results, and sometimes you got to go higher numbers in order to get what you want. In this case, I think I think 10 is about the magic number that's going to get us where we want to be. So I'm going to say okay. And I'm actually going to delete the input because I don't care about the input anymore. And you can see that I end up with this really nice, really kind of well-ordered curve. And if I mirror this, then what I can do is make the modifications I need to do in order to make this look good. And if we turn the control points on, you can see that these points are out of line. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move these back to here. And so now when I select these, you can see that I've got a scale handle in the Z, but I don't have a scale handle in the Y, which is the green. So I'm just going to scale this to 0. And that, now all my scale handles are gone, which means that this is now tangent. The scale handle is a really, really good indicator of what kind of shape your curves are in. So if I grab these 2 points, and I'm going to pull those forward and snap them there, you can see that the green scale handle goes away, and I've got just the tiniest hint of a blue handle. So I'm going to scale that to 0, and then it looks like I've got just the hintiest hint of a green handle, so I'm going to scale that to 0 as well. So now all my scale handles are gone. That means that these are actually lined up in 3D space. So, all right, so once you've got the points, you can check them. And if you don't have any scale handles, then you know, obviously the red one is going to be there, but anything at the origin is not there. That tells you that these curves are lined up and in good shape. So now I can take these and join them. And if I extrude this, I should get a SubD part. Oh, it looks like when I joined them, it went back to a Nurbs curve. All right, that's fine. So we'll do this. Now that we know that's set up, if I extrude this, I get a SubD, right? And that's what we want. But I don't want it to go in that direction. I actually kind of want it to go out. So I'm going to go to the front view. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to start scaling. I'm going to hold down Shift, and then I'm going to hold down Control. And as I do that, when I hold down Control, see that line that's flashing at the end? That's telling you that it's actually connecting those 2 points. And I'm going to pull that out like that and just get myself a little ribbon. I'm going to pick this point, Control Shift drag, and I'm just going to gumball drag that so that it's flat. And that is the main ribbon that the rest of the mask is going to be built off of. And if I bring my head back, I can see that ribbon needs a little bit of adjusting. So I'm just going to grab this edge. I'm going to grab from here to here. And I'm going to peel that back a little bit. Like that. And then I'm going to grab this one, Control Shift click where that point is. I'm going to pull this back a little bit. I'm going to pull that in a little bit. And so now we're in a SubD workflow, right? We were in a Nurbs workflow before, and now we're in a SubD workflow. And I'm going to grab this entire edge, and I'm going to just pull this back until I see it contact. And this is going to be silicone, so we've got quite a bit of freedom as far as, the ishiness factor of how precise this actually needs to be. Now, if you had a really, really good fit model, yeah, maybe you would actually go nuts and make it super, super precise. In this case, I think I'm probably going to just wing it. We're going to call that kind of about there. And then maybe this edge needs to come out just a hair, like that. And I'm going to call that pretty good. Maybe we pull this one just a bit, like that. All right, and so this is the very outside edge of the mask. That's what's going to actually be the boundary of it. This is the inside part of the mask in here, and this is going to be the part that we're going to connect to here. So I'm going to grab these two pieces, I'm going to isolate, and then we can see what we've got going on. And I'm going to mirror this because we need it to be mirrored now. And I'm going to just stitch these two edges by average, stitch this. And you can see that when I stitch that, that edge changed from a dark edge to a light edge. Right now, see how this edge is darker than the ones around it? Keep an eye on stuff like that in your model because it will give you a very good indication of where stuff needs to be joined up. Okay, so now this is a single SubD. Now the cool part about this is I can grab this entire inside edge now and I can just extrude it, boop, like that. And it's not quite the right shape, so I'm going to use Gumball again, and I'm going to Gumball relocate up here, and that is lives in here in the bunny tail. I have a hotkey set up for it because I use it a lot, and if you want to see what that looks like in my aliases, it is, I have it set to the GR key, and the command is just Gumball relocate. So you can make a new one, set it to whatever keys you want, and the command that it actually runs is Gumball relocate, which you just put there. So the way that this works, right, all the aliases, anything that goes in the command line, when you run a tool, it actually gives you the name of the command. If you copy that command and paste it here and assign it to a key, that hotkey will run that command. Now the cool thing about Rhino is you can actually string stuff together. So like in this case, my isolate is the invert command with a space and then the hide command after it. And so when I hit I enter, it runs invert and then hide, which is the essentially the isolate command. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on that, but this is a super powerful way if you want to make Rhino go faster, is to hotkey stuff. So if I grab this edge and I Gumball relocate up here, and then I just scale to that point, look what happens. This all starts to flatten out. And we have already gotten really close to what we want to have happening here. These two edges are not cool, so let's fix those. That one, these guys. So let's fix these guys a little bit. So I'm going to just pull those forward. And then we're going to worry a little bit about the nose section in a minute. But what we can do now is we can start saying, okay, how does this piece and this piece, how do they relate? And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this whole thing, go to the top view. I'm going to bring it so that I basically just snap it to this edge. And then I'm going to scale this stuff more or less flat. And I can even do that with scale 0. Right? I can just do that and flatten it out. And now I can move this in and out like that. And that essentially gives me a very close representation to kind of where the location of this thing needs to be in space. Now, the shape of it isn't right, and we can start messing with that by just starting to scale this down a little bit. Right? So that's close most of the way around. And then we need to figure out what we're doing with the nose. And the nose, basically, if I grab these two edges, we've got a bottom of the nose, right? So I'm going to extrude that straight out like that. And then we've got the front of the nose, which is going to come up, and I'm probably going to give myself a center edge there so that I can adjust the shape of that. And then I'm going to just pull this back like that. And that's going to give me kind of the basics of where the shape of the nose is going to be. So let me isolate just this, just the mask at this point. And we can start looking at like, how do we put that together? So I'm going to switch to box mode by hitting the tab key because model in box mode and refine in smooth mode is what I always tell people. So I'm going to pick these 2 points with Shift Control Drag, and I'm going to bring this in. And I'm going to bring these 2 points in as well, Shift Control Drag on these points. Shift Control Drag or Shift Control Click, by the way, is sub-object selection. And that is a very powerful selection and modification tool in Rhino. Now, I've got an edge here and I've got an edge here, which means all I have to do to connect those is bridge. And I'm going to bridge that with just one segment, and I'm going to join it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And that gives me, essentially, if I switch to smooth mode, the box section, and I'm going to get rid of this crease. The box section of my mask. And it looks like I've got, see this dark edge in here? It looks like I've got some creases in here that I need to deal with. So I'm going to get rid of these. And I'm going to get rid of the one down the center. And that gives me a much nicer shape. And I can even get rid of this one. And you can see how that starts to kind of pull together into a nose shape, right? So what I would probably do at this point is bring the mask back and then take a look at how these two things are starting to relate. And I probably would want one more edge loop between here and here. I could probably just drag this, you know, like that. Could probably make that work. In fact, I don't hate that. It's a little, I don't know, the nose is a little flat, so maybe we back off of that. So let's grab this entire edge, and I'm going to start dragging a scale handle. I'm going to hold down Shift, and then I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm actually going to scale in just a little bit. And that's going to give me another edge in there that we can now mess with. And now when I move these guys, see how the shape of the nose kind of maintains itself a little bit more? And I'm not super concerned about working symmetrically at this point because I can always run the reflect command and get it back. I just want to get close. So I'm going to just kind of pull this over here, kind of like that. And if we were just doing a visualization, right, we could probably get away with just calling this done. But that's probably cheating even a little bit too much for me. I'm a big advocate of lying, cheating, and stealing when it comes to modeling. When it comes to life and morality, no, don't do that. But if you want to lie, cheat, and steal with a model and get there faster and finish your job and do your job better, faster, cheaper, I am all for that. All right, so that gives us the basic shape that we need, right? That's our nose, that's our face, this is all that stuff. I'm going to get rid of this crease because I don't need it. And you can see that we get this really nice blending, smooth shape. Now, how do we get from here to here? That's the next trick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dupe this edge because I want to be able to kind of identify where that thing is. And I'm going to isolate again. And then all we need to do, this is just a simple matter of going in the front view, and we can just start pulling and getting this about where we want it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close. Because we're not actually going to join the SubD to the curve itself. We're just going to get it close, and then we're going to convert it to Nurbs, and then we're going to trim it back. Or we're just going to build a blend surface to it, or. There's all sorts of different things that we can do, right? But I'm just going to pull this, and you're like, wow, it was so clean up until this point. You started pulling it, and now it's a disaster. It's okay. Don't worry about it. You worry too much. Let's just get this somewhere close. And maybe we want to pull this one down a little bit. Maybe this one wants to pull over a little bit. Maybe this goes over here. All right. And let's just take a look. Let's switch to box mode. I'm going to isolate and switch to box mode. And let's just take a look and see how destroyed this thing is. And box mode is where all of the lies are revealed. And so you can see how disgusting this is. So let's fix that. Let's pull this up. Let's get this point, and this point. Let's scale those to 0 so they're flat. And then let's grab this one and let's drag it up so it matches that one. And then so this one kind of goes over here like that. So let's maybe pull this one back over. Or let's make our life easy and let's just run a reflect on this so that we can run symmetrically. And I'm going to just go right down the center of this thing. And now any edit we do on this side is going to be reflected over onto the other side. Now, we don't like it when SubDs turn back inside on themselves, so I'm going to undo that so that that is not turned inside out. And let's look at what we've got going on over here. And let's pull this one up a little bit. And it looks like we've got a little bit of a mess back here that we need to untie. See how this is turning inside out on itself? We don't want that. So let's pull this back up like that. So we fix that inversion. And then this is just going to come forward a little bit like that. And then same thing with this guy. This is just going to come forward a little bit, and that's going to turn that back to being what it should be, right? And so we've got something fairly close. So let's bring back our mask. Let's grab our curve. Let's grab our SubD, and let's invert, and then let's switch to smooth mode, and we can see how we're doing. And this is the curve that we wanted to work with. And so we've got a little bit more work to do. So I'm going to grab this edge and I'm going to just pull it so that it's a little bit closer. I don't need to get crazy with this, but I do want it to be just a tiny bit closer than that. And let's bring this one over, and you can see what reflect is doing for us. It's giving us the other side for free, which is nice. And let's call that about good. Looks like we're a little forward here, so let's pull that one back like that. And that is probably close enough for what we need to do. So now all we need to do is we need to connect the dots here, and it looks like we're punching into our nose a little bit, so let's fix that. It's one of the nice things about working with the buck. Any place it pokes through, you can fix it. And let's pull this whole edge down a little bit, like that. Let's pull this whole edge down a little bit, like that. And you can see that we've kind of like, in an hour and some babbling, pulled off a fairly complex model. Right? Now the cool thing about this is we have everything we need now to connect all of this stuff up. And what we're going to do is essentially just get rid of a little bit, or we're going to build a little surface. Actually, what we can even do is just overbuild this. And yeah, let's do that. Is grab this whole edge. I'm going to scale it in just a little bit more. And then let's overbuild it. Let's just pull it all the way through the goggles like that, which seems a little counterintuitive, but stay with me. And it looks like we've got some adjustments we need to do here. I want to make sure that all of this stuff is like inside the mask. You're like, wow, that looks like crap. It does, but it's, hang on, we're getting there. We paid money for this? No, no, it's free. These are free. You didn't pay anything for this. You get what you pay for. All right. All right, so we're gonna pull through like that. I'm gonna grab this piece and isolate, and I'm gonna just cap the back of this thing to make a surface. And then I'm gonna turn right around and I'm gonna extract that surface, highlight it, bring back this, and then I'm gonna just take this and I'm gonna trim. This is gonna automatically convert this to a Nurbs object, and it looks like it doesn't intersect all the way, so we've got a little bit more work to do. So let's pull this edge like that, and let's pull this out like that. Let's pull this up, and then it looks like this edge needs to go back in space like that. And then that gives us, let's get a little closer here. This interactive nature of SubD is one of the things that I like best about it, is it's just pure visual feedback. You just look at it, you make a decision, 3D on the fly, and you go. All right, let's get this a little closer to the edge out here. Let's get this a little closer to the edge out here. Let's fix this mess by scaling to 0. And pull this out a little bit like that. We're just going to get it fairly close. And so now we can take this and we can trim it. And when we trim it, it's going to convert to Nurbs. So if we know we're going to do edits later, we're going to make a copy object to layer. We're going to name this SubD, saved, and then we're going to hide that layer. Should be 2 copies of it somewhere. Nope. Copy object to layer. There we go. Now that one is saved on that layer, so when I trim this, it's going to convert it to Nurbs. And if I bring this back, that is my SubD layer that I can edit later. Like if I find out there's a problem, I can come back to this. There's no way to go from SubD back to Nurbs. And so this is kind of my trim line, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this back a little bit farther, and I'm going to trim it again so that I'm building a gap, because I want to have a gap between this thing and the object. It looks like should trim. Looks like we've got it. Interesting. Looks like it doesn't want to trim that for some reason. It looks like we are intersecting everywhere, oh, except for right there. So in this case, it's not important the shape of this, so I'm going to scale this a little bit. I was just missing the edge of that thing by a hair. Now it'll trim. Now I can delete this, bring this back, bring the faceplate back, and then I've got this piece and this piece that I'm going to isolate. And I'm going to simply just run a blend surface between the two. Blend surface. I'm going to chain the edges of this, and I'm going to chain the edges of this, and we're going to just blend between those. And in this case, I'm probably going to go position to the number 2, so I'm going to just go position there, and I'm only going to go tangency to 1. I don't need to get crazy. And then I'm going to just slide this back a little bit. And let's check it to see how our isoparams are running. It looks like we might need to add a few shapes in here just to keep it from getting crazy on us. Sometimes when you're doing a really complex blend like this, the isoparams will squirrel out on you a little bit, so you need to add a few shapes to help it find its way. And then we can join all of this up. Okay, so the cool thing about this, and it looks like we missed here. All right, fine, be that way. For whatever reason, one side joined and the other didn't. I have very little patience for that kind of nonsense, so goodbye. Just get rid of the side that misbehaves. There we go. And now we know the model's symmetrical and it's all joined up. So take that. Now, this is just a single surface model, right? If we were doing this for real, we would have to have thickness on the glass, we'd have to have the frame, we'd have to have thickness on the silicone and all that kind of stuff. In an hour, I don't really think that you guys want to sit and watch me model B surfaces for another hour to get this done. But the cool thing about this is we're actually in a position where if we throw this into rendered mode and we get rid of our edges, this thing is kind of developed to the point where if I bring my face back, that we have a fairly convincing, model. And the nose pokes through a little bit and this pokes through a little bit and stuff like that. And, we're assuming that silicone is flexible and faces are flexible and everything's going to smush together and all that kind of stuff. But the end goal here is the process is fairly straightforward, right? And so the only thing that we would need to do now is decide whether the strap is, has a piece that comes off of the silicone that it's hooked to, or whether it's got a piece that comes off the plastic and do all that kind of stuff. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it here because the main thing I wanted to show was that process between how to fit the SubD and the Nurbs parts together. And the cool thing about this is if we decided, say for instance, one effective trick here is the face. If I change the color on this, let's say I just make it red, you can see everywhere where the face pokes through. And so we've got some work to do on the nose. And the cool thing about that is because we saved the SubD, we could always just bring the SubD back, make a modification on the SubD, make the same trims, do the same blends and all that kind of stuff, right? That process is fairly straightforward. So the iteration and the fit testing, this is why you keep the SubD. I would finish this up with the B surfaces so that it was something that I could throw through a printer. I would print it in like Ninja Flex or something. I'd print the whole thing in like Ninja Flex, and then I would stick it on a fit model and see how it goes. Okay. Or if you've got hard parts already, I would print the gasket out of Ninja Flex and then put it together and then do your fit testing. And then you can do all your iteration because you saved the SubD part. You could say, okay, well, yeah, it is actually pressing down on the bridge of the nose too hard. You bring this back, push it up a little bit, do your trims, keep this, don't get rid of it, but make a copy of it, make the edits, make your fit adjustments, and then go from there. Okay? Or we can just do this and go, link. And I've got to go back a little farther. All right, we can cheat it and say it's something like that. Perfect. All right, but you get the idea, right? All right. Any questions on anything that you've seen here? Any any functional questions or anything that I went too fast on or anything like that that you want to see again? Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. I think we'll call it there for the day. I may pick at this for another 10 or 15 minutes and throw some materials on it so I can get a decent render for the video. But we'll cover that in a different day. So anyway, thanks for joining. If there's no other questions, I'll let you go. My name's Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.